Well, to start this off, I grew up in the 1970s in a small town in North Carolina. It was almost too small to be called a town with only a school and a couple of small shops. I'm guessing you can imagine how boring it would be to be a teenager there, and it would have been if it wasn't for those woods. The neighborhood that I lived in backed up onto a big forest that spread out for about 3 miles, and it's where I spent most of my teenage years with my two best friends, Levi and Connor. Levi lived across the street. He was smart and kind of quiet, unlike Connor, who lived down at the bad side of the neighborhood. Connor was a troublemaker, getting sent to the dean's office at least once a week. He was loud, obnoxious, and a natural leader, always finding something for us to be doing, be it legal or not. When he was around, we were never bored. It was the beginning of summer, and Levi had called for me. We went down to get Connor, who was messing around with his younger brother in the front yard, and we asked him if he wanted to go in the woods. He said yes. Connor had almost black, shaggy hair and the most beautiful eyes. One was a light blue, while the other was a brownish color. He always wore scruffy red Converse shoes and a denim jacket, and of course, I had the biggest crush on him. While Levi had styled brown hair, brown eyes, and freckles, and was considerably shorter than me. And then there was me, a red-headed, brown-eyed girl that quite a lot of people were scared of due to my hyper personality. I was always ready to go somewhere or do something, and I was always talking about something. Anyway, we made our way into the woods and started walking into a random direction. We did this for fun, as it meant we would usually get lost and have to find our way back, which, most of the time, just led to us being late for dinner and getting sent to our beds early, or worse, getting grounded. But we did it anyway. We were making our way along a deer trail that I didn't think we had ever been on before when Connor found a pile of crap and, of course, dipped a stick into it and began chasing us with it. Levi and I, of course, freaked out and scattered. Obviously, neither of us wanted to be smeared with crap. I ran off, and luckily for me, Connor followed Levi instead in the opposite direction. After a while of them not coming back, I began to think they had left me, and I was furious. I was walking down the way I had seen them run when suddenly something stuck out of the bush and grabbed me. I let out a surprised yelp, and Connor shushed me, only for me to shout at him for scaring me. When I saw the look on his face, I decided that I should not be talking, and I shut my mouth. Connor whispered to me, "You have got to see this," and began to lead me through the bushes. The further we went, the more I could smell something disgusting. Finally, we came upon an almost green Levi staring at the ground with a weird expression on his face. I was about to ask him what was wrong, but Connor tugged me past him a few feet away to where there was a ditch, and in that ditch was what I could only describe as something out of a nightmare. It was a body. It was a purple-blue color, and it almost looked swollen up. The stench was so terrible, and I had to cover my mouth with my jumper so not to gag. I backed up to where Levi was. Connor stood looking into the trench for about 5 more seconds before he walked back over to us. "Cool, huh?" he said with a grin. Levi gave him a disgusted look before saying, "No, it ain't cool. We need to go home and call the police." "What? Why?" "What do you mean, why? There's a body dumped in the woods, Connor. It's clearly been murdered." "No, man. It's so cool. We cannot get the police. If we do, they're gonna think it was us who killed her." "Why would they think it was us?" "Because that's what the police do, man." "Don't be stupid, Connor. You can't stop me. Oh man, if you get the police out here, it will be on the news. Everyone will get questioned. They will probably put out a curfew, and they will ban us from going into the forest. There will be police everywhere, and the summer will suck. I had just been quietly watching the argument taking place, not really caring what happened, but that got to me, and there was no way in hell that I was going to let my summer get ruined. Connor's right. What? You are not serious. Levi, we have the whole summer left. Do you really want to spend it inside? Yeah, man. 2 against 1. Come on. Don't do anything stupid. Levi looked crushed. Fine. But I'm not going near this thing again. Connor had let out a whoop of joy, and we had made our way home listening to him talk about how it would be our secret. Well, the secret didn't last very long, as by the end of the week, Connor had shown all the rest of our friends, and it was a miracle that nobody called the police. But I guess that just shows how close everybody was. We were like one big family, and like most families, we had our secrets. The body remained there for the rest of the summer. I only went up a few more times, and it had gotten less interesting each time, and according to Connor, there was only bones left. Anyway, on the last week of summer vacation, we decided to have a big camp out with all of our friends. There was me, Levi, Connor, Josh, a loudmouth boy with mousy brown hair and blue eyes, Alice, a quiet girl with straight brown hair cut into a neat bob, Courtney, who I would describe as the only girl I actually saw as a friend, probably because she was the only one who would put up with my bratty attitude. She had long, dark brown, almost black hair and brown eyes, and also had freckles dotting her cheeks. And then there was Kenny, the kid whose yard we were camping in. He had sandy blonde hair, brown eyes, and freckles. His dad owned the biggest yard, so of course we had to camp there, and as an added bonus, Kenny's yard backed right onto the woods. Even though we had promised Kenny's mom that we would not go into the woods after dark, we were planning to. But unfortunately, our plans were foiled by good old Mother Nature, as she had decided to make it rain. So all 7 of us piled into the biggest tent, which belonged to Courtney, and played cards for about 2 hours, making up new games with crazy rules. Josh even suggested that we play strip poker, only to have a shoe chucked at him, and to be told that if he carried on acting like a pedo, we would send him home. He quieted down after that, and we carried on playing until Kenny began complaining that we were going to run out of oxygen. This went on for a good 10 minutes before he decided to unzip the tent and stick his head out so he could breathe. Hey guys, the rain stopped, said Kenny excitedly. Seriously? I said. Yeah, let's go do something. We then all argued for a good 20 minutes about where we were going to go and what we were going to do, and so far breaking into our school and hanging out there was winning. That was until Connor said, why don't we go see the body? That was it. Everyone put on their shoes and coats, and Kenny took down his dollar store flashlight that he had hung from the roof of Courtney's tent, and off we went. Connor and Kenny led the way, but Kenny's flashlight, to be honest, was pretty crappy and didn't light the way very well. And I don't believe that we needed it anyway, because even though I hadn't been to the body in weeks, it was burned into my mind how to get there. The whole way there, we were talking about what it would look like now and how creepy this all was, and then the conversation took a turn that it never had before. We began talking about who we thought the body was, why they were dead, and who murdered them. This scared me because it made me see it for what it really was, a dead body of a murdered person hidden by someone in the woods. Plus, we had never reported it. I brought this issue up to Connor, who simply stated, "Well, it's too late now. There's probably only bones left, and even if we did tell the police, we would get in trouble for holding off for so long." To this, I remained silent and kept walking alongside Courtney and Levi, listening to Josh telling Alice some bullcrap story behind us. They soon went silent, though, as we came to the ditch. Connor and Kenny stood silently at the edge, shining the flashlight into it. Kenny's mouth agape in horror. I asked what it was, and Connor shushed me and beckoned the rest of us over with his finger. As I came to the edge, I saw what they had freaked out about. In the ditch was something piled on top of the original body. It was wrapped in a yellow floral patterned bedsheet, and it was tied with some sort of string to stop the sheet from coming away. Everyone stood silent for what felt like hours, but in reality it was probably only a couple of seconds before Connor pulled his Stanley knife out of his pocket and descended into the ditch. Levi began to protest, but Connor turned and shushed him and whispered for Kenny to shine his light on him, to which Kenny obeyed. Connor then cut some of the string and pulled at the sheet until it revealed the face of a young girl. She stared up at us with dead, glazed-over eyes and a blank expression. I felt like I was going to be sick, and apparently so did Levi as he began to violently reach, and he turned away. I could not turn away, no matter how hard I tried. I was mesmerized. Connor suddenly jumped back. A look of sudden realization and horror crossed his pale face as he began to scramble up the side of the ditch. Josh helped him up, and a chorus of "What happened?" and "What is it?" began, only to have him frantically shush us. With a shaking voice, he said, "It's dry as a bone." A feeling of absolute dread settled in my stomach, and if you don't get what the big deal was, it had rained only an hour earlier. Everything was wet, and this body was dry, which means that it had to have been put there recently. Everyone was silent. Then there was a noise behind us across the ditch. My heart was in my throat. As we turned around, and Kenny quickly pointed his flashlight at where the noise was coming from, and then click. Suddenly, from across the ditch came an extremely bright light illuminating us and making the person holding the light impossible to see. "Run!" yelled Connor, grabbing me by my arm, and everyone sprinted. Whoever it was with the light sprinted to their light, swinging violently as he ran, randomly illuminating trees and bushes and scaring the crap out of some deer. And then suddenly, it went off. I felt my heart stop, and Connor was muttering, "Shit, where is he?" under his breath as we ran for our lives. I tried listening to hear if whoever it was behind us, but all I could hear was my pulse racing. Everything was beginning to go blurry as we crashed through the tree line and into Kenny's backyard. Levi stumbled in a couple of seconds later, face streaked with tears of fear, followed by Josh. We huddled together and everyone began blabbering about what the hell was going on and who was that and what do we do if he finds us. But then Courtney spoke up. "Hey, where's Alice?" Everyone went silent and looked towards the woods in fear until Levi spoke up. "Kenny, go get your dad." Connor looked over to glare at Levi before turning to Kenny and barking, "No, Kenny, don't get your dad. Let's think about this, okay?" "What do you mean, think about this?" "Look, he will call the police, and do you think the police are going to believe us?" "Yes." "No, they won't. Look, we're going to wait for 5 minutes and then we can get your dad." And for some reason we waited 5 minutes. Soon It turned into 15 minutes, and then Connor reluctantly turned around to us and let out a defeated sigh. Kenny, go get your dad, but you tell him that we were playing tag and she ran into the woods so she would not get caught, okay? Right. Now, Kenny's dad was a terrifying man. He was 6 foot and built like a tank. He was also an ex-Marine. Kenny begins pounding on his back door, and this goes on for about a minute before Kenny's dad threw open the door, face red with fury. "What are you doing, boy? It's 2 in the damn morning," he hollered. "Dad, Alice is in the woods." "What?" "She ran in when we were playing tag and she hasn't come back out. We think she's gotten lost." Kenny's dad stared off into the woods for a bit, squinting, trying to see beyond the tree line before muttering an okay and retreating into his house, only to return 5 minutes later with a big flashlight. He stomped off into the woods. We all waited for about 20 minutes before he returned and said, "Fun's over, kids. Go home and get your fathers and tell them to bring flashlights." And that was it. We all went home and told our parents what was going on, and all the men went out into the woods to look for Alice, while the women stood around in Kenny's backyard, while we were all told to stay at home, to which I didn't. I crossed the street and knocked on Levi's door. He answered and I stepped inside, and apparently Connor had the same idea, as he was sitting on the sofa in Levi's house eating some chips. "Do you think they will find her?" I asked quietly. "Yeah, she's probably just panicked and got herself lost," said Connor. "And what if he got her? What if she's dead? What are you gonna do then?" said Levi as he stood by the window looking into the dark street. "Then we keep to our stories. She ran off into the woods and didn't come out. That's all you say." Suddenly, the sound of police sirens cut through the air. "Oh no," mumbled Levi as the police cars drove down the road to Kenny's house. We watched as 2 police cars pulled up, and the men got out carrying big flashlights, and they walked around back and into the woods. After that, me and Kenny went home, and I watched out my window as suddenly 5 more police cars appeared. My parents came home at around 6. I asked my mother what happened, and she told me that they found a body in the woods and that it wasn't looking good. The next day, the police interviewed all of us, and we stuck to Connor's story. They didn't find Alice, and just like he said, there was news coverage with a ban on us going into the woods, and there was a curfew for 9 p.m. When we went back to school, there was an assembly on safety with strangers. They eventually found Alice in the end, 12 days later, dead on the side of the road 10 miles from her house. I have my own kids now, and have since lost contact with all of my childhood friends, apart from Levi, whom I now have a child to, and he recently told me that Kenny had been killed due to an overdose, and we were invited to the funeral along with the rest of the kids I grew up with. I will not be attending that funeral.